On this week's Political Figure episode, we've got the guy who's giving Democrats the chance to lose Congress twice in just a few months, Mr. Mike Waltz. And that is Waltz, W-A-L-T-Z, not to be confused with Walls, W-A-L-Z. And if you need help remembering the difference, the added T is for treason. Mike Waltz was born January 31st, 1974 in Boynton Beach, Florida. Gen X in Florida. What could go wrong? Well, Mike grew up and went to high school in Jacksonville, Florida, which is one of the worst villes. I guess that's kind of a given, though, considering it's in Florida. But Jacksonville blows like a hurricane, even on a Florida scale. He then went on to Virginia Military Institute and got a Bachelor in International Studies before joining the military as a commissioned lieutenant. He became an Army Ranger. He's been in the Army for 27 years. He went to Afghanistan and did, like, Army Ranger shit. He got himself a few Bronze Stars. It's an impressive military career. One he's managed to exploit, in maybe not the most ethical ways, to make himself millions and millions of dollars that we the taxpayers have had to pay for. Because in 2010, with Baby Bush's former Assistant Secretary of Defense, Mary Beth Long, they started a defense contracting firm that did a bunch of defense contracting shit in Afghanistan, where he was doing Army stuff. They're obviously both very well connected with defense stuff, him being a high-ranking Army Ranger and her being the former Assistant Secretary of Defense. So they got a ton of contracts to do whatever it is that private defense firms do, and they also got a bunch of contracts for being a woman-owned small business. Contracts he continued to get woman-owned small business preferential treatment on even after Mary Beth Long sold her stake and there was no longer a woman owner of Meta Solutions. But hey, I guess identifying as woman-owned even when you're not a woman is okay as long as you're just doing it to get multi-million-dollar defense contracts. And then in 2018, he decided to run for Florida's 6th congressional district to replace Ron DeFascist, who had gone on to be the white high heel wearing Kim Jong-un of America's flaccid appendage. He won and has been Florida's 6th congressman ever since. It took him a couple years, however, to divest from his defense company, but I don't see any conflict of interest in being a U.S. congressman who also owns a defense contracting company. Since being in Congress, he spent most of his time yelling on Fox Entertainment about, I don't know, whatever makes Grandpa angry. Trans people, communists, Mexicans, that kind of thing. But to give credit where it's due, he hasn't been all bad in Congress. Mostly bad, but not all. Like, for example, he voted with 46 other Republicans to codify gay marriage, which is not a very Republican thing to do. He also voted against the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023, which was a bullshit bill written to gut programs as a compromise to Republicans holding the entire country hostage with the debt ceiling. Beyond those things, he's not been super great. For example, you know how most politicians say that they don't want any more forever wars? Not Mike, though. He is all in on forever wars. Like in a 2017 interview, Mike said that he was convinced we could win in Afghanistan through slow cultural conversion, which sounds bad because it is. But he expanded on it. He said we could win by using unconventional forces to change hearts and minds over multiple generations. And it would probably take us 100 years or so. No joke. This motherfucker in an interview in 2017 said we should stick around in Afghanistan for at least another century. And you dumb fucking Floridians were like, yeah, this is a guy who should be in Congress. In his defense, though, he does own a company that makes millions of dollars helping the U.S. blow up Middle Eastern children. And it's easier to make all of that money when we are actively at war blowing up those Middle Eastern children. Which is probably why he's also a staunch supporter of Bibi in Israel. Huge fan, loves their work. He also hates China, probably worse than anybody else in Congress. He's advocated for sending the United States military into Mexico to fight cartels, which seems sketch. And that type of meddling in our neighbors to the south has not historically been the best decision. But hey, entire regions don't destabilize themselves. Despite being one, Mike also seems to hate veterans, voting against the PACT Act, which would have expanded VA care. But hey, I guess you don't really need to worry about veterans benefits when you've become a multimillionaire by exploiting service members trying to keep them at war for at least another century. He also hates women, unless he's using them to get preferential treatment on government contracts. He thinks women should be forced to sign up for the draft, and he was also a huge fan of overturning Roe v. Wade and loves abortion bans. Dude's made huge speeches on the House floor and everything about unborn Americans' rights. Spent a bunch of time arguing that the science has changed and evolved and fetuses are people because heartbeats and shit. Although I'm not sure why he's worried about the science since he doesn't seem to believe in science elsewhere. Like climate science, for example. He's mocked Biden for saying that climate change is a huge national security threat. Because it is, according to everybody with a functioning brain, including most of the defense community. But seriously, on Fox, of course, Mike said that Biden thinks that climate change is a top threat in our national security. But Trump knows what the bigger threat really is: nukes in the hands of dictators. But in that segment, which you can go watch, is on his Insta, he talks about how North Korea specifically having nukes is bad, okay? Which it is. But then he goes on to say that the guy who knows how to handle the problem of dictators having nukes is the same guy who wrote literal love letters to the dictator who has the nukes. The exact same dictator he was literally just talking about. Florida, could y'all just tone it down with the meth like a notch? Just a hair. Also, Putin's another dictator with nukes, and Trump loves that asshole too. Speaking of Trump, it's weird because Mike seems to disagree with Trump on a lot of stuff, yet continues to gargle his balls like they're orange-flavored Listerine. For example, he was a big supporter of Ukraine because, you know, he's a person in U.S. defense, and the only fucking thing that makes sense is to support Ukraine against one of our arch enemies, Russia. And then Trump comes out and he's like, hey, Putin's not that bad. Maybe we shouldn't support Ukraine so much because Putin owns my soul because I can't manage basic finances and I may like to get peed on in Russian motel rooms. And then Mike's like, yeah, maybe I am reconsidering my position on supporting Ukraine. He didn't support Trump's disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal, saying that it was going to alienate our allies and get a lot of people killed. And yet he still fully supports Trump being the commander-in-chief again. He also voted against the January 6th commission because that oath of office he took was really just more of a suggestion. But hey, having to continuously wipe all of that orange Cheeto dust looking stuff off of his mouth seems to have paid off because Trump has nominated him to be his national security advisor. And he is arguably Trump's most qualified cabinet nomination so far, which is a bar that requires an Evel Knievel level leap to clear. Mostly so you don't plummet to the bottom of the canyon they've buried that bar in. Dr. Oz is a fucking cabinet pick. Sophie is more qualified than like 99.7% of his entire cabinet. And she enjoys rolling in and eating horseshit. But anyway, his nomination to the cabinet allows us to get fucked by Florida again. Because you see, he is currently the congressman for Florida's 6th district, but he can't be Florida's 6th congressman and a member of the Trump cabinet. So that means that they are going to have a special election at the end of January to fill his seat. And Republicans currently only have a couple seat majority in Congress. And because Trump is tapping half of Florida for his cabinet, that won't be the only seat in Florida up for grabs, which means that Republicans, in theory, could lose their hold on the House. But to do that, they have to lose Mike's seat at the end of January. So what I'm telling you, Florida, is that you have a great opportunity to just not be the fucking worst for once in your life. And look, Floridians, even if you're a Republican, just think about this objectively, which I understand is a big ask. But the founding fathers, America, created our governmental system to have checks and balances. That's why we've got a House and a Senate and a judicial branch and an executive branch. But because we've allowed rich corporate fucks to molest the ever-living shit out of our political system by dumping as much money as humanly imaginable into it, we no longer have those checks and balances because one party is about to control every aspect of the government. Like Republican voters, I know that you think Republicans are fucking awesome, but like, have you met them? All I'm saying is just maybe having, you know, one little part of the government there to sort of pump the brakes on some of their more outlandish ideas wouldn't be horrible, right? And Florida, you once again have the opportunity to be the hero and help save democracy and restore the America that the founding fathers dreamt of. You won't, because you literally always let us down. But you do have the opportunity, and I love being proven wrong. Now, I really don't think you can prove me wrong, because, you know, you're Florida. But I would love to see you try. Specifically on January 28th, that's the date where you get to try to prove me wrong. You won't. You'll definitely still elect another child-molesting, warmongering Republican, like I said you will, but that's the day you get to try and prove me wrong. January 28th.